The Panama Canal, the shortcut of America, is dying. Quick plug, like and share. Now canals have been an essential asset for naval commerce, beginning with the Sui-Jiangnan Canal of 609 CE to the Corinth Canal of 1881. Now the idea of a canal which connected the Atlantic to the Pacific was first ordered by the Spanish King and Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, wanting to shorten the distance between the Spanish capital and the Viceroyalty of Peru. This was eventually dropped, as even the shortest distance would involve digging a canal through or up a hill. This idea would be resurrected in 1668, when Sir Thomas Browne wrote in his book, Pseudodoxia Epidemica, that, quote, "Some isthmus have been eaten through by the sea, and others cut by the spade, and if the policy would permit, that if Panama and America were most worthy the attempt, it being but few miles over, and would open a shorter cut unto the East Indies and China." This idea would be attempted by the Scottish government. This idea would be known as the Darien Gap, an overland trade route which tried to make a highway to move goods from one side of the country to the other, transferring the goods from one ship to another. This ultimately bankrupted the Scottish government, forcing them to join with the British government to pay off the debt. In 1788, the American government suggested that the Spanish, who controlled the Kingdom of New Granada, which included modern Colombia and Panama, should construct a canal across it. The region would be surveyed, and in 1793, Alessandro Malaspina completed his journey from Cadiz to Alaska, then Alaska to Manila in Polynesia. This survey information would unfortunately be shelved, as Malaspina would be arrested on his return due to committing treason by trying to overthrow the government. Small side note: the Napoleonic War would happen, and this would isolate the viceroyalties of Spanish America and lead to their self-sufficiency and ideals for independence. By 1825, all of continental Spanish America had declared independence, and America had constructed the Erie Canal in New York, a relatively stable climate, well developed, and most importantly, controlled by the American government. So they decided to negotiate with the Grand Colombian government to construct a canal through the Panama region, which was a tropical, hot and humid jungle area filled with exotic animals, tropical diseases and insects. Notably, it was an underdeveloped region that was 3,513 kilometers by sea away from America, compared to the 0 kilometers distance between the Erie Canal and America. Practically the same thing. El Libertador Simon José Antonio de la Santísima Trinidad Bolívar Palacios Ponte y Blanco and the officials of Gran Colombia were contacted by the American government to gain a concession to construct a canal. This was ultimately rejected, as the government was afraid that by granting a concession to America, it would be seen as exchanging Spanish domination for American domination. Gran Colombia would dissolve after the passing of the Liberator, and the successor state, the Republic of New Granada, would be extremely unstable, halting any negotiations for some time. Roughly a decade later, in 1843, the United Kingdom would enter into a contract with the New Granada government to construct a canal across the Isthmus of Darien, really doubling down on this area. It was expected that the Atlantic and Pacific Canal would be completed by 1848, this ultimately fizzled out, likely due to difficulties in excavation, treacherous terrain and tropical diseases. Other locations like the Isthmus of Tehuantepec were considered, but rejected. The Isthmus of Tehuantepec would see the construction of a railway which carried cargo from the Atlantic port to the Pacific port, opening 1895. In 1846, New Granada granted America the right to move and intervene militarily in the region of Panama. This was at the perfect time, as the Californian gold rush began in 1848, so the Panama region became an important midpoint in American Pacific travel. Ships would go from the coasts to Panama, where the goods and personnel would be transported overland, then loaded up on ships. This was the fastest route for items, such as Californian gold, to go from one coast to the other. Between 1850 to 1855, the United States would construct the Panamanian Railroad, now known as the Panama Canal Railway, to shorten transport time. It would cost $8 million USD, or $283 million USD in 2024 dollars, and due to the difficult terrain, would cost 5 to 10,000 laborers' lives. In 1855, the Manx-born engineer, William Kish, would publish the book The Practicability and Importance of a Ship Canal to Connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. In 1877, the French government would attempt to repeat their success with the Suez Canal by constructing a shortcut through the Panama region. The Colombian government would grant a 99-year lease to Lucien Napoleon Bonaparte twice, known as the Wise Concession. With the previous success of the Suez, funding for the canal was easy to acquire. But the actual construction was far more difficult. The Suez had a water level difference of 0.65 meters and 1.9 meters. The Panamanian landscape lacked any pre-existing sea routes like the Suez did, was located in a jungle filled with venomous animals and diseases like yellow fever, and unlike the desert of the Suez, was prone to seasonal flooding. Most importantly, the area had significant elevation changes, meaning that water locks, or specialized gates and pumps would be needed to raise two ships up to the highest point of 26 meters, before then lowering them down and departing again. By the third year of construction, the job was averaging 200 dead per month. The latest equipment and steam tools were used, but due to the temperate weather and humidity, the steel equipment was rusting quickly. Money was continually poured into the project despite the fact that it was clear that goals weren't being met and cost overruns were obvious. By 1889, 22,000 people had died, and $287 million USD, roughly 9.6 trillion USD now, had been spent, bankrupting 800,000 investors. The entire operation ground to a halt in May 15, 1892 as the Panama scandal broke. This saw many arrested for embezzlement. Many of the people convicted were later be exonerated. A second company would take over the project in 1894 and tried to find a buyer, selling for 109 million USD, or 3.9 billion USD. The US would show interest in a canal project, debating whether to build a Nicaraguan canal or buy the existing Panamanian work. The French company would sell their work to the American below their asking rate to ensure they didn't go with the Nicaraguan one, selling for 40 million instead of the 109 million. That's still $1.4 billion in 2024. The Americans signed a treaty saying that for 10 million USD or 350 million USD, plus yearly payments of $250,000 US or 8.7 million, they will own the land in perpetual. The Colombian government failed to ratify it. The New Granada government rebranded many times until becoming Colombia. Panamanian rebels would contact President Roosevelt for support. Using the Mallarino-Bidlack Treaty, specifically the part of military intervention in the region, America supported the Panamanians, who then signed the Panama Canal Treaty with America, with the same clauses. This war for independence was known as the Thousand-Day War. American engineers were arriving to begin work on the canal before the treaty was signed. Until 1939, Panama would be an American protectorate. America would also pay the Colombian government $25 million in 1921, or $430,750,000 now, to recognize Panamanian independence in accordance to the Thomson-Arusha Treaty, with $5 million or $86,150,000 upon ratification and the remaining split between 4 annual payments. When America began their work on the canal, they created the Isthmian Canal Commission, to oversee it. The commission would answer to President Roosevelt's successor, then Secretary of War, William Howard Taft. The American-run project would overhaul the campsites, from the lavatory to the residence halls. taking steps to reduce yellow fever spread and other diseases. This saw almost all mosquito spread diseases reach zero. Unfortunately, 5,600 workers still died from diseases or accidents in the construction. The biggest hurdle was the sea level or the tin lock system. The tin lock was chosen as the alternative would require digging through 26 meters of stone, resulting in large cost overruns, and have the canal transport ships from the Atlantic to the 0.2 meters higher Pacific Ocean. So first Gatun Dam, the largest dam at the time, was built to create the Gatun Lake, which displaced 40,000 Panamanians. 5 lock gates were constructed on either side of Gatun Lake. It would work by moving the ship into the first lock, which would be flooded to raise the ship to the second level. This would be repeated until the ship was in Gatun Lake, before the process would be repeated in reverse where the water would be pumped from the higher level to the lower level. This continued until the ship reached the other ocean's sea level, discharging millions of liters of fresh water into the ocean. So as long as rainwater kept refilling Gatun Lake, the water loss wouldn't be a problem and the canal would continue working unabated. Foreshadowing. Now the canal would be completed 2 years ahead of schedule, opening in 1914, just in time for the Great War. Yada through the Second World War, Korean and Vietnam War, the canal would be upgraded to allow larger battleships to cross. By 1977, President Jimmy Carter and dictator of Panama Omar Herrera would sign an agreement that granted Panama control of the canal with America in exchange for its permanent neutrality. They gained sole sovereignty of the canal effective 12 o'clock, 31st of December, 1999. In 2006, the canal would be widened to 3 canals to accommodate wider and larger ships. This expansion would cost $5.25 billion USD, or $8.03 billion in 2024. This would take between 2007 and 2017 to complete. This expansion would increase the water loss up to 200 million liters per ship, multiplied by the 40 ships per day. This incredible usage for water would not be an issue as long as the rain kept refilling the lake. Then the rain stopped. Thanks to recent El Niño dry spells with record low rainfall. This low water level has led to 2 options for the government: issue water rationing for the Panamanian people, or restrict the number of ships in the canal. To prevent civil unrest and a possible civil war, the government had the ship traffic. As of now, the country is looking for options to solve the issue. This issue is a direct consequence of global warming and there's no quick solution. One potential solution would be damming and/or redirecting the nearby rivers and flooding more of Panama, resulting in more displacement of people. This is unlikely as it would cause more political unrest, likely resulting in the disposition of the government. Currently, all we can do is watch and wait to see what Panama will do.